In my life, few days have been as transformative as the one when my father, Robert, passed away unexpectedly at the age of 50. My father was a man of few words and even fewer displays of wealth, which is why the reading of his will left my mother, Susan, my sister, Sandra, and me in complete disbelief. The lawyer, with a somber tone, revealed that my father had left behind a $50 million estate, a staggering figure that none of us could have imagined. As the eldest son, I had always anticipated taking over my father's modest business and continuing his legacy in a straightforward manner. However, the will not only disclosed his hidden wealth, but also presented an unequal distribution that heavily favored Sandra and me over our mother. This revelation struck a raw nerve within the family, initiating a series of legal and emotional conflicts. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. My mother, Susan, aged 45, was devastated. She could not grasp how the man she had spent 20 years with had amassed such wealth without her knowledge, or why he chose to distribute it in such a peculiar manner. Her grief quickly morphed into suspicion and resentment, leading her to question the authenticity of the will. She felt sidelined in a life she had been integral to, which deeply affected her sense of trust and security. Amidst this turmoil, Sandra, 25, appeared unusually composed, suggesting she might have known more about our father's intentions than she initially let on. Her calmness, in contrast to our mother's despair, added another layer of tension to an already fraught situation. As for me, I found myself in an excruciating position. I was caught between my mother's growing incredulity and the staggering reality of our new financial status. I pondered why my father made such decisions in secret, what led him to accumulate this wealth so discreetly, and why he decided to leave such an enigmatic will. This inheritance, far from being a blessing, felt like a curse that threatened to dismantle the family structure I had cherished all my life. The will became a source of constant debate and conflict, with each family member grappling with their individual shock, disbelief, and the looming question of what truly constituted my father's legacy. In the coming weeks, the situation escalated as my mother decided to legally challenge the will. The family home, once a place of warmth and unity, turned into a battleground of differing allegiances and hidden agendas. Through it all, I struggled with my own emotions, trying to balance the love and loyalty I felt towards my mother with the respect for my father's final wishes. This inheritance dispute unearthed deep-seated issues within our family, questioning the very foundations of our relationships. It made me realize that the wealth my father left behind could potentially change our lives, but at what cost? The answer to that question seemed increasingly grim as we braced for a legal battle that none of us truly wanted. Each step forward in the process only highlighted how much we had already lost since the day of that shocking revelation. The days following the revelation of my father, Robert's, were filled with a whirlwind of emotions and an avalanche of legal documents. My mother, Susan, driven by a mixture of grief and disbelief, made the decision to contest the will. She could not fathom how my father had managed to secretly accumulate $50 million, nor could she accept that he would leave such an uneven share to his children, effectively bypassing her. The legitimacy of the will, she believed, was questionable at best. Armed with determination and the support of Mr. Jack, our family advocate, my mother initiated a legal battle that would soon consume our lives. The court became the arena where our family's dirty laundry was aired, with each session uncovering more layers of our personal and financial histories than any of us had ever wished to reveal. Susan's arguments in court were based on several points. She questioned whether my father had the mental capacity to make such decisions at the time the will was drafted and suggested undue influence or coercion, possibly from external parties we were not yet aware of. She also raised concerns about the possibility of a fraudulent will, given the unexpected nature of the wealth and its allocation. Each court appearance was emotionally draining. I stood by her side, not fully convinced of her suspicions, but supportive nonetheless, understanding her need for clarity and closure. Sandra, on the other hand, maintained a stance that seemed to isolate her further from our mother. She argued that our father had the right to distribute his estate as he saw fit and that questioning his motives was both disrespectful and futile. As the legal proceedings dragged on, the strain on our family intensified. The public nature of the court case attracted media attention, which only served to amplify the spectacle. Reporters dug into my father's past, uncovering his silent partnerships and investments that had flown under the radar for decades. This media frenzy turned our personal ordeal into public entertainment, something none of us were prepared for. Amidst this turmoil, Mr. Jack played a critical role. His expertise in family law and his calm demeanor in the face of our family storm were invaluable. He navigated the complexities of the case with a level of professionalism that offered a small comfort in our time of chaos. Yet, his attempts to mediate were often overshadowed by the raw emotions that surfaced with each revelation. The legal battle also forced me to reconsider my understanding of my father. Each session in court, each disclosure of his hidden life, painted a picture of a man I thought I knew but perhaps never did. This inheritance, wrapped in mystery and legal tape, became a symbol of lost connections and hidden truths within our family. Through it all, my mother's resolve never wavered. She pursued the case not just in search of her rightful share, but also as a quest for truth about the man she had loved and the life they had built together. This battle, though fraught with legal complexities, was at its heart a search for identity and acknowledgement in the shadow of a legacy that had suddenly become as enigmatic as it was monumental. The legal dispute over my father's will not only brought to light the hidden facets of his financial life, but also started to reshape the relationships within our family. Amidst the ongoing legal battle, my sister Sandra's evolving perspective began to further divide us. Initially, Sandra had been as shocked as anyone else by the revelations of the will, but as the proceedings continued, her views began to shift, aligning more closely with the stipulations laid out by our father. Sandra, 25, began to articulate a belief that our father, Robert, had his reasons for the decisions he made regarding his estate. She suggested that his choices were deliberate and possibly intended to impart lessons we had yet to understand. Her stance brought her into direct conflict with our mother, Susan, whose challenge to the will's authenticity was rooted in a sense of betrayal and confusion about her exclusion from the substantial inheritance. The tension between Sandra and our mother escalated quickly. Family gatherings became battlegrounds, where conversations about the will devolved into heated debates about loyalty, intention, and grief. Sandra accused our mother of being unable to respect our father's autonomy in making his final decisions. Meanwhile, Susan was hurt by Sandra's lack of empathy and her apparent disregard for the emotional turmoil the will had unleashed. As Sandra isolated herself from our mother, our once close-knit family began to fragment. Her relationship with Susan grew colder and more formal, a stark contrast to their previous warmth and closeness. This change was painful to witness. I found myself in the middle, trying to maintain peace and understanding between the two, while also grappling with my own conflicted feelings about the inheritance and its implications. The shift in Sandra's allegiance also affected her relationship with me. We had always been allies, siblings united against whatever challenges came our way. However, the inheritance dispute revealed different philosophies between us concerning wealth, responsibility, and family loyalty. Sandra's newfound assertiveness in claiming what she believed was rightfully designed by our father created an unexpected rift between us. Moreover, Sandra's arguments prompted me to reconsider my own stance. I began to explore the possibilities that perhaps our father had intended this challenge to be a catalyst for change or growth in our lives. This introspection was difficult and often lonely, as it seemed to put me at odds with both my mother's grief-driven pursuit for justice and Sandra's seemingly pragmatic acceptance of the will's terms. As months passed, the inheritance issue continued to dominate our lives, overshadowing all other aspects of our family's existence. The legal battle, fueled by these internal conflicts, drew attention not only from family and friends, but also from the broader community and media. This public scrutiny added an extra layer of stress and complexity to our already strained relationships. In this emotionally charged atmosphere, I often found myself reflecting on the deeper meanings of inheritance and legacy. The dispute had forced all of us to confront uncomfortable truths about our family, our values, and ourselves. As Sandra drifted further from our mother's emotional orbit, it became clear that the outcome of this legal and personal battle would likely redefine our family dynamics permanently. Whatever the resolution, the scars from this conflict seemed destined to linger, shaping our relationships and individual paths far into the future. As the inheritance dispute unfolded, Mr. Jack, our family advocate, emerged as a pivotal figure. His role transcended the typical boundaries of legal representation, as he found himself deeply involved in both the emotional and legal complexities of our family's crisis. His experience and calm demeanor became crucial as he navigated the turbulent waters of our family dynamics, trying to find a resolution that might salvage both our familial bonds and our financial interests. From the onset, Mr. Jack was acutely aware of the sensitive nature of the dispute. He understood that beyond the substantial $50 million at stake, there was a grieving family struggling to cope with the loss of a patriarch and the unexpected consequences of his last will. His approach was methodical and empathetic, aiming to mediate between conflicting interests within the family while ensuring that the legal proceedings were handled with fairness and diligence. Mr. Jack's strategy involved several key moves. First, he sought to establish clear communication channels among all family members, encouraging transparency and open dialogue. He arranged mediation sessions that included not just the immediate family but also extended relatives who were affected by the fallout. These sessions were designed to air grievances in a controlled environment, allowing each family member to express their feelings and perspectives without the formalities and constraints of court proceedings. During these mediations, Mr. Jack carefully listened to each party's concerns. He paid particular attention to my mother, Susan, who felt marginalized by the will's provisions. He also engaged with Sandra and me, understanding our positions and the potential reasons behind our father's decisions. His ability to navigate these conversations with tact and insight was instrumental in preventing further escalation of the conflict. Moreover, Mr. Jack utilized his legal expertise to explore all possible outcomes of the will contestation. He laid out the potential scenarios, from the complete overturning of the will to its full execution as written, and discussed the legal ramifications and likely timelines for each. This clarity helped us prepare for the long-term implications of the dispute, setting realistic expectations about the possible financial and emotional costs involved. Another significant move by Mr. Jack was his effort to introduce independent experts into the case. These included forensic accountants who could provide a clearer picture of my father's financial activities and estate planning experts who offered insights into the possible motivations behind the structuring of the will. This holistic approach not only enriched our understanding of the legal landscape but also provided a broader context for our father's decisions, which was crucial in softening some of the more accusatory tones within the family. Throughout the process, Mr. Jack remained a figure of stability and reason. His presence was reassuring, providing a buffer against the often overwhelming emotions that the dispute stirred. His strategies for mediation did not always lead to immediate reconciliation, but they injected a level of professionalism and care that was desperately needed. As the months wore on, the role of Mr. Jack proved to be more than just that of an advocate. He became a confidant and a counselor, guiding our family through one of the most challenging periods of our lives. While the ultimate outcome of the legal battle remained uncertain, his efforts ensured that whatever the result, it would be reached through a process that respected the dignity and the emotional well-being of all involved. Amidst the whirlwind of legal battles and shifting allegiances, my role as the eldest son became increasingly complex. My struggle was not just about navigating the turbulent waters of inheritance disputes, but also about maintaining a semblance of unity in a family that seemed on the brink of permanent division. The challenge was daunting. On one side was my mother, Susan, devastated and feeling betrayed by the revelations of my father's will, and on the other was my sister, Sandra, whose perspective on our father's decisions was markedly different from ours. As I watched our family being torn apart, I often reflected on my father's intentions. Could he have foreseen the chaos his will would unleash? Or had he underestimated the bonds that held us together, thinking perhaps that the financial security he was providing would outweigh the emotional costs? These questions haunted me as I tried to bridge the growing gaps between my loved ones. The estate valued at $50 million had suddenly become a curse rather than a blessing. Greed and suspicion had infiltrated our interactions, replacing the warmth and trust that once defined our family. Each legal development or revelation seemed to drive a deeper wedge between us, with family members choosing sides in a battle that felt increasingly personal and painful. My efforts to mediate were met with mixed reactions. My mother, heartbroken and confused, leaned on me for support, yet her pain made her wary of any discussions that seemed to undermine her stance against the will. Sandra, meanwhile, viewed my attempts at peacemaking with a certain degree of skepticism, interpreting them as a lack of support for our father's expressed wishes. This delicate balancing act was exhausting, both emotionally and mentally. In seeking to understand both sides, I organized private meetings with each family member, attempting to listen without judgment and to speak without causing further hurt. I encouraged open discussions about our feelings towards the inheritance and our memories of our father, hoping to find common ground in our shared loss. Furthermore, I reached out to Mr. Jack, our advocate, for advice on how to navigate the legal implications without letting them destroy our family ties. His guidance was invaluable, providing me with insights into the legal process and helping me communicate these to my family in a way that was informative but not confrontational. The media attention that our case attracted only added to the pressure. Reporters were eager to paint a sensational picture of a wealthy family at war, which brought an unwelcome public scrutiny to our personal ordeal. I found myself shielding my mother and sister from invasive questions and paparazzi, further complicating my role as the family protector. Through it all, I held on to the hope that we could find a resolution that respected both my father's intentions and the needs of all family members. This hope was tested repeatedly as the case dragged on, with each court appearance and legal maneuver pulling us further apart. In my heart, I knew that the real battle was not over the millions left behind, but over the legacy of our family's unity and the values we wanted to uphold. The struggle to maintain those, amidst the chaos of greed and grief, defined my journey as a brother and a son during this tumultuous time. Just when we thought the contours of our family crisis were defined by the existing $50 million inheritance, a new twist emerged that deepened the complexity of our situation. Further investigation into my father's financial affairs uncovered additional assets that had been cleverly concealed in various investments and offshore accounts. This revelation came as yet another shock to us all, casting new doubts on what we thought we knew about my father, Robert, and his legacy. The discovery of these hidden assets was brought to light through the diligent work of the forensic accountants hired by Mr. Jack, our advocate, as part of the legal proceedings initiated by my mother, Susan. Their findings indicated that the $50 million estate previously identified was only part of a larger portfolio, meticulously arranged to avoid detection. The reasons behind my father's secrecy became an even more pressing question, complicating the emotions and legal strategies surrounding the will contestation. As the eldest son and a pivotal mediator in the family, I found myself at the forefront of this new development. The revelation had a dual impact. It intensified the greed and conflict among extended family members and potential claimants, while simultaneously providing a potential avenue for a more equitable resolution among the immediate family, if handled correctly. The nature of the additional assets varied widely, from real estate holdings in multiple countries to investments in private companies and significant stock portfolios. The scale of this discovery required a reevaluation of the inheritance dispute, prompting a strategic shift in our legal approach. Mr. Jack suggested that this could be an opportunity to negotiate a settlement that might satisfy all parties more comprehensively, potentially quelling the brewing storm within the family. However, the negotiations were anything but straightforward. The presence of more assets meant there was more to argue over, and tensions escalated as each family member reassessed their stance. My mother, already deeply mistrustful of the circumstances surrounding the will, became even more adamant that her exclusion was a deliberate act of betrayal. Sandra, on the other hand, saw this as further validation of our father's foresight and financial acumen, arguing that it was proof of his intention to provide for us in ways that were beyond conventional. Amid these conflicting perspectives, my role became increasingly complex. I had to navigate not only the emotional landmines within our family but also the intricate legal implications of the newly discovered assets. My goal remained to foster a resolution that could bring peace to the family, but with every new discovery, that goal seemed further out of reach. The negotiations over these additional assets involved numerous rounds of discussions, mediated by Mr. Jack, who had to balance legal advisement with psychological insight into the family's dynamics. These discussions were arduous and often emotionally charged, as old wounds were reopened and new suspicions were raised. Throughout this ordeal, the concept of legacy took on a new meaning for me. It was no longer just about the wealth left behind, but about the memories and values associated with that wealth. The additional assets underscored a profound disconnect between the father I thought I knew and the businessman who had operated with such secrecy. As we moved forward, the struggle to reconcile my father's dual legacies, his role as a family man and his identity as a secretive financier, continued to challenge our family's ability to come together and heal from the revelations that seemed to keep unfolding. The path to resolution was fraught with legal and emotional hurdles, but it was a path we needed to navigate carefully, balancing the practical realities of wealth with the emotional realities of family ties. The legal proceedings, already steeped in complex financial revelations, took a deeply personal turn during the testimonies that were meant to untangle the intentions behind my father's will. These court sessions became emotionally charged events, exposing the underlying rifts within our family that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. As the eldest son, I watched with a heavy heart as each family member took the stand. The courtroom, filled with lawyers, reporters, and curious onlookers, served as a stark backdrop to the raw emotions displayed by my mother, Susan, and my sister, Sandra. Each testimony shed light on their pain, their hopes, and the betrayal they felt. Susan's testimony was particularly heart-wrenching. She spoke of her life with my father, Robert, painting a picture of a partnership that she believed was based on mutual respect and shared decisions. Her voice broke as she recounted the later years of their marriage, when Robert became more secretive, a change she had attributed to the stress of his business but now believed was linked to his clandestine accumulation of wealth. She expressed her feeling of betrayal not just by the contents of the will, but by the entirety of her married life, which she now saw under a different light. Sandra's perspective, however, was markedly different. When it was her turn, she defended our father's decisions as acts of a man who was not only ensuring his family's financial security, but also imposing a test upon us. She argued that our father's will was a challenge for us to rise above our petty grievances and to handle his legacy with maturity and grace. Her testimony was firm and composed, but it did little to bridge the growing divide between her and our mother. During my own testimony, I strived to provide a balanced view, acknowledging both my mother's pain and my father's probable intentions. I spoke of the man I knew, a loving father and a savvy businessman who perhaps failed to see the emotional ramifications of his secretive financial planning. I also highlighted the additional assets discovered, emphasizing the need for a transparent and fair resolution that could honor his complex legacy without further damaging our family bonds. Mr. Jack, our advocate, played a crucial role during these sessions. He navigated the legal intricacies and emotional landmines with a finesse that only someone deeply familiar with the family could manage. His objective was not just to win a case, but to mend a family, if possible. The emotional toll of these testimonies on our family was immense. The courtroom often felt like a pressure cooker, with old grievances and unresolved issues coming to the fore. The process was cathartic in some ways, but incredibly destructive in others. Relationships that had taken decades to build were fracturing before our eyes, held together only by the thin hope of a resolution that might somehow address both the emotional and financial needs of all parties involved. The impact of these testimonies extended beyond the confines of the courtroom. They were discussed and dissected by the media, turning our personal pain into public spectacle. This added layer of exposure only compounded the stress and anxiety we all felt, making the proceedings even more daunting. As the court sessions continued, it became increasingly clear that the outcome of this legal battle would redefine our family dynamics forever. Whatever the verdict would be, the scars from this ordeal would linger, challenging us to find a way forward in the aftermath of a legacy that was as complex as the man who left it behind. As the inheritance dispute dragged on, the possibility of an amicable settlement seemed increasingly remote. Negotiations had begun with a faint hope of compromise that would allow our family to avoid the protracted bitterness of a court battle. However, as stakeholders entrenched in their positions, these negotiations gradually disintegrated into a series of failed attempts that only served to deepen the existing divides. The initial stages of negotiation had seen some promising moments. Mr. Jack, our family advocate, orchestrated several mediation sessions aimed at fostering a dialogue that might lead to a mutually acceptable resolution. During these sessions, we explored various settlement options, discussing ways to equitably distribute not only the $50 million named in the will, but also the additional assets that had been uncovered. Each of us, my mother Susan, my sister Sandra, and I, brought our own perspectives and emotional baggage to these discussions. Susan remained steadfast in her belief that she had been wrongfully excluded from the will and deserved a significant share of the estate, not just for financial reasons, but as a matter of principle and respect. Her stance was hardened by the revelations of the hidden assets, which she saw as evidence of deceit. Sandra, on the other hand, continued to advocate for respecting our father's final wishes as documented, interpreting the will as a testament to his foresight and understanding of each family member's true needs and character. My role in these negotiations was painfully difficult. I tried to bridge the gap between my mother and sister, proposing various formulas for asset distribution that might satisfy both legal and emotional claims. However, each compromise suggested seemed to only highlight the vast gulf in perceptions and expectations among us. Sandra viewed these compromises as betrayals of our father's intentions, while Susan saw them as necessary to correct a profound injustice. The sessions often ended in frustration and tears, with each of us retreating to our respective corners. The emotional toll was visible on everyone involved. The stress exacerbated old wounds and created new ones, making rational discussion increasingly difficult. The intense media scrutiny and public commentary that followed each negotiation session added an extra layer of pressure and invasion into our already strained lives. As Mr. Jack navigated these troubled waters, his role expanded from legal advisor to emotional anchor. Despite his efforts, the possibility of finding common ground seemed to slip further away with each passing day. The legal implications of the dispute, combined with the high financial stakes and the deep emotional involvement of each party, created a complex web that was difficult to untangle. Ultimately, the failure of negotiations led to a hardening of positions that felt almost insurmountable. The breakdown of talks marked a pivotal moment in our family's saga, as it became clear that the resolution would have to be found in court. This realization was a bitter pill to swallow, as it signaled not just the failure of compromise, but potentially the end of any semblance of familial unity. As we braced ourselves for the continuation of the court proceedings, the atmosphere was one of resignation and grim determination. The stakes were now higher than ever, not just in terms of financial outcomes, but in the lasting impact this battle would have on our relationships. The prospect of a court-mandated resolution loomed large, promising little in the way of healing the rifts that had come to define our family's interactions. After months of emotional testimonies, failed negotiations, and intense legal scrutiny, the day of the final verdict arrived. This was the moment that would determine the distribution of my father's $50 million estate, along with the newly discovered assets, fundamentally reshaping our family dynamics. The tension was palpable as we entered the courtroom, each of us carrying a mix of dread and anticipation. As the judge began to speak, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. The verdict would not only decide the legal fate of the inheritance, but would also signal the beginning of a new chapter for our family, one that might either mend or irreparably sever the fragile ties that still held us together. The judge acknowledged the complexity of the case, noting the deep emotional undercurrents that had influenced every aspect of the proceedings. The decision took into account the myriad legal arguments presented by both sides, the testimonies that revealed so much about our personal relationships, and the significant implications for family unity. The verdict was more nuanced than any of us had expected. It did not fully grant any single party's wishes, but instead laid out a structured compromise that attempted to address the valid concerns raised by all involved. The judge ordered a redistribution of the assets that differed significantly from the allocations specified in my father's will. This included a substantial portion awarded to my mother, Susan, recognizing her contribution to my father's success and the injustices posed by her initial exclusion. Sandra received a considerable share, but with specific conditions attached to foster responsible management of the wealth, reflecting her arguments about preserving our father's legacy and the business acumen that he valued. As for me, I was entrusted with overseeing certain aspects of the estate, tasked with maintaining the balance between preserving our father's business legacy and ensuring fair support to all family members. The verdict also mandated family counseling as a condition of the estate settlement, recognizing the deep emotional wounds that needed healing beyond the legal resolutions. This part of the ruling underscored the judge's understanding that the issues at stake went far beyond financial assets and touched on the very essence of familial bonds. As we left the courtroom, the mood was somber. There was a sense of relief that the legal battle was over, but the emotional residue was thick in the air. Sandra, Susan, and I exchanged tired glances that spoke volumes about the weariness we felt. It was clear that while the court had reached a decision, the path to emotional recovery and true reconciliation was still ahead of us. In the days following the verdict, we began to take tentative steps towards understanding and, potentially, forgiveness. The mandated counseling sessions turned out to be less about the will and more about unpacking years of miscommunications and unspoken grievances. We slowly started to see each other not just as adversaries in a legal battle, but as family members who had all lost something irreplaceable, the unguarded trust and simplicity of our relationships before the will was revealed. The Judgment Day had indeed redefined our family dynamics, imposing a new structure on our interactions and financial dealings. But it also opened a door to possible reconciliation, offering a glimmer of hope that perhaps, in time, we could rebuild something even stronger from the ruins of our dispute. The final verdict in the inheritance dispute brought both closure and new challenges to our family. It marked the end of a tumultuous legal battle over my father's $50 million estate, but it also ushered in a period of introspection and rebuilding. As we began to navigate the aftermath, the lessons we learned from this ordeal became crucial in shaping our paths forward and in preventing future conflicts. One of the most significant lessons was the importance of transparency within the family. The secrecy that had surrounded my father's financial dealings had been a major catalyst for the dispute. Moving forward, we committed to open lines of communication regarding financial decisions, ensuring that no family member would feel blindsided or excluded again. This commitment extended beyond mere financial disclosures to include more frequent and honest discussions about personal expectations and concerns. Another critical lesson was the value of legal and financial planning. The complexities revealed through the court proceedings highlighted the need for clear, well-documented estate plans that consider not only legal requirements but also the emotional and relational dynamics of the family. We learned that such planning should not be a secretive affair but a collaborative process that involves all stakeholders. This approach would help mitigate misunderstandings and provide a clear framework for future generations. The mandated family counseling sessions turned out to be a transformative experience. They taught us the importance of addressing underlying issues before they escalate into full-blown conflicts. Through these sessions, we began to understand each other's perspectives and grievances more deeply, which facilitated a gradual healing process. We learned that listening, truly listening, to one another was as important as any legal document in maintaining family harmony. The experience also reinforced the idea that wealth can be both a blessing and a burden. We saw firsthand how financial assets could create opportunities, but also how they could lead to divisions and discontent. This realization prompted a reevaluation of our values and priorities as a family. We started to place greater emphasis on relationships and shared experiences over material gains, recognizing that the true legacy we wanted to build was one of mutual respect and support. As we implemented these lessons, new beginnings started to take shape. Susan, Sandra, and I found ourselves forging a new type of relationship, one that was perhaps more cautious and measured than before, but also more mature. We established new traditions and routines that allowed us to enjoy each other's company without the shadow of past conflicts looming over us. We also began to engage in joint philanthropic efforts, using a portion of the inheritance to fund causes that were important to us. These projects not only helped mend our familial bonds, but also allowed us to honor my father's legacy in a positive, impactful way. They gave us a shared purpose and helped shift the focus from what we had fought over to what we could achieve together. Reflecting on the entire experience, it was clear that while the legal battle over the inheritance had been painful, it had also been a profound learning opportunity. It taught us about resilience, the complexities of human relationships, and the capacity for forgiveness. As we moved forward, these lessons became the foundation of our new beginnings, guiding us towards a future that, while different from what we might have envisioned, held the promise of unity and mutual respect.